Gabi-gabi yan, ginagawa.
Natulog ako kanwari, natulog ako. 100번 더 말했어. 100번 더 했어. 말해 뭐 무슨 일은 학길에 일이 됐노? 안 되잖아.
All I wanted to do is to wash away all the shame, the dirt, just wash it away.
During World War II, many women were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military. It is estimated that between 80 to 200,000 women were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military. The majority of the victims were Korean. A protest organized by former sex slaves takes place every Wednesday outside the Japanese embassy in central Seoul. They demand that Japan apologize for the atrocities it once carried out. The protests have been held each and every Wednesday for the past 23 years. Only 51 former sex slaves remain alive today in Korea. So many before them passed away without ever having received a proper apology from the Japanese government.
Hello and welcome to the second edition of UpFront. I'm Naihan Kyung.
Hello, I'm Yoo Jong-soo. On today's UpFront, we are going to discuss the wartime sexual slavery issue.
And for that, joining us in the studio is Minister Cho Yoon-sun. She is Korea's Minister of Gender, Equality and Family. Thank you so very much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you. How would you like to define the significance of wartime sexual slavery issue in this current administration?
Actually, we have seen that the sexual violence in conflict regions has been never stopped ever since the world history began. And recently, up until very recently, we saw in many other countries in regions of conflict that we saw very, very serious problems of sexual violence. I think that the reason that why, even though the international community raises its voice against those sexual violence, there is no such a kind of stop of these tragedy is because we didn't properly address the past misconduct of the same mistake. So in that regard, as a responsible minister for the comfort women, so-called comfort women issue, I think that issue is not a matter of past. That is a current and future issue, and that is not an issue between Korea and Japan as a governmental issue. I think that is an issue of human rights.
And shortly after taking office, you vowed to meet all victims of former past wartime sexual slavery in Korea. And you are in the process of doing so. Out of all other important tasks given to you as a minister, what made you focus more on this issue in particular? Because, I mean, you did briefly mention, but still.
Actually, I was appointed as this minister last March, but last August, two of the remaining ladies passed away. And then after that, we had only 51 ladies left, and in addition, 5 other ladies living in the outside of Korean territory. And recently, in last January, one additional the lady passed away again. And last August, I found that we didn't have much time. They cannot wait for a long period of time. And then we had to resolve this matter as soon as possible. And at the same time, I'd like to know and I'd like to meet them in person in what situation they are right now and how great kind of pain they have been suffering from. And especially by doing so, I believe that I can give them a great comfort and great compassion. I'd like to show them that the Korean government is sharing compassion with them and would willing to share the pains of their past. So that I thought that is one of my great mission to do that.
I feel the vibration from you. The Minister of Foreign Affairs traditionally handle this issue, so-called conflict women, considering that this is issues between Korea and Japan. As the Minister of the Gender Equality and Family, you decided to really involve in this issue and bring this issue international level. Is there any reason?
I think I have several reasons. First of all, Ministry of Gender Equality and Family has the responsibility of taking care of the medical condition and the kind of living conditions of those ladies. However, last year, we allocated our budget to their medical checkup, the regular medical checkup. But the report from the hospital was that many of them are too fragile to take the medical checkup. And for many of them, it is useless because many of them are just relying on the liquids, kind of nutritions. They cannot eat properly. So I was so sad to hear that. And then I really like to check the reality of the surviving ladies. And at the same time, we thought that the reason why, regardless of the repeatedly, the international community is urging the Japanese government to do something, to apologize and to do proper actions to solve this problem. The Japanese government is very silent for a long period of time. I found that, unlike the Holocaust, the world citizens don't know much about what is the comfort women issue, what is the wartime sexual slavery issue. So I'd like to let those ordinary world citizens know about this fact, and by doing that, we can have gather more sympathy and compassion from the world citizen. So I think that is one of our responsibility to make this known as a Holocaust during the Second World War. And in that procedure, I found that many of the Jewish movie makers and PDs and writers had a great contribution in making this information spread out to the world.
So your work is not focused on political ties. That will be the role of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se will not be offended by the work you do, right? Exactly.
I think each ministry has their own responsibility.
Exactly.
So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has their own responsibility, kind of dealing with the Japanese government in terms of foreign affairs. And Ministry of Gender Equality and Family should take it as a kind of human rights, and especially the human rights of women from the sexual violence.
So your ministry and Foreign Affairs Ministry, they work together on this issue?
We discuss very closely. So when we prepare my speech to the Third Committee of UN, we discussed very closely, and I sent a draft and get the comments. And whenever we do something about this issue for the international community, we discuss.
Former Japanese Prime Minister Murayama offered an apology for Japan's colonial rule of Korea during World War II. Former Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Kono also publicly admitted and apologized to the many women who were forced into comfort stations for the purposes of sexual slavery. A total of 1,671 intellectuals in Japan gathered together recently and released a joint statement to succeed the Kono statement and develop its mindset.
それによって戦争を進めていこうと、こういうためにそういう組織を作り、そういう女性たちを集めたと、でそういうことをさせたというわけですから、これは日本の大きな責任です。強制という要素が基本にあると。
However, a number of extreme right-wing politicians in Japan continue to make offensive remarks on the matter.
この談話を出したことは間違いないんですけれども、やはり中身的におかしいという人もいっぱいいるわけで、それでそのおかしいという人たちが言う一つの大きな理由は、この談話に基づいていろんな記念碑が建てられて、慰安婦のですね、そこに20万人の以上の女性がセックススレーブにされたということが書いてあると、こんな事実はないじゃないかと、それはその通りなんです。
Now, just to play the devil's advocate here, and please don't hate me for saying this, but there are also views, mostly by Japan's conservatives, that the Japanese government had already apologized and had already compensated the victims. How is this viewed by the victims that you talk to at the, for example, House of Sharing?
Actually, whenever I kind of do some interview with the foreign press, the most frequently asked question is this: we argue, the Korean government is arguing that it is not solved, and the Japanese government is arguing that it is solved. So don't you think it is controversial? So whenever I'm asked that question, I show them and read them the resolution of US Congress passed in year 2007 and again early this year. That decision, that resolution kind of requests 4 things to the Japanese government, including the sincere apology should be made and proper history education should be made to the young generation. And however, what I count more from the resolution is not the resolution itself, but the preface. So I brought the preface of that resolution. It determines that the so-called comfort women is unprecedented in its cruelty and magnitude, and it is considered as a major war crime and human trafficking of the 20th century. And the new textbooks in Japan seeks to downplay the comfort women tragedy, and the Japanese public and private officials have recently expressed a desire to dilute the statement of Kono, which expressed the government's sincere apology and kind of remorse for the ordeal. And the government of Japan is not diligently educate the younger generation regarding its past history. So this is kind of actual real background, and that is specifically cited in the US resolution. And I think that kind of concludes all those kind of allegations.
I had a chance to meet with the victims, and the expression saying Japanese government is waiting for them to die. That way, everything is gone. So, as you know, they are getting old, and many of them have passed away. And do you think what we can do more to secure their testimonies or evidence of how they have been lived through this really suffering?
Yes, that's what I was recommended by the French intellectuals when I went to the Angoulême Festival. Actually, Dr. Cuir, the president of the Critic Association, he told me that this is a very tragic history and it's very hard to review. However, we should collect the evidence and we should study in depth regarding what happened and how we should handle this matter. So in that regard, we have started a task force consists of government entities and the private academies to collect the evidence and to preserve the evidence. And to in order to do that, we have kind of invited the National Archive and review those documents and proofs and designate them as a national document. So in doing so, we can find out what to preserve. And the most important thing, as the Jewish victims are doing at the moment from the Holocaust Foundation and Museum, is that we should not forget this and educate the young generation, and they should and help them to learn from the past tragedy. So that is something that we should do in terms of the comfort women issue.
A number of documents prove Japan's forced mobilization of comfort women. This is an official document sent to a Chinese comfort station by the Japanese military. These documents prove that Japan's comfort stations were indeed a national crime. China's Jilin Provincial Archives, along with the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, revealed 25 sets of documents related to comfort women. The documents include a letter written by a Japanese national living in Heilongjiang Province, China. A photo album released by Japan's Mainichi newspaper in 1977 described one of the pictures. Violations of human rights and proof that the truth was covered up have been revealed through more detailed evidence.
经驻川部队和海军扫荡的败敌尸体，从这条街到扬子江下游绵延2-3里远，结果大体是。
Now, there are also ongoing efforts overseas to erect monuments or memorial statues regarding this issue, but they're met with Japan's opposition. Shouldn't the Korean government take a little bit more active and aggressive stance in supporting the overseas Korean community who are basically behind these movements?
What is more important and more important in that regard is that instead of kind of directly involving as a government entity, we have to indirectly support by means of kind of fulfill the archives that those kind of contents that they can use and they can educate the Korean younger generation and the other foreign younger generations, and kind of prepare some platform or help them to network each other, because there are a lot of very dedicated NGOs and dedicated people who are working on their own. But we have to make a synergy effect. So I'm now trying to make them work as a hub, so that they can kind of share the information, so that they can kind of encourage each other. So that's what our government should do in this regard.
Earlier this year, a bill related to Japan's wartime sexual slavery passed the U.S. Congress, and now we're joined by Congressman Mike Honda, representative for the U.S. state of California. He joins us now. He played a critical role in passing this bill. Thank you for joining us, Congressman Honda.
As a Japanese American congressman, why did you decide to take a leading role in passing the bill related to sexual slavery?
Well, being American of Japanese ancestry, I don't think has anything to do with my role in the issue of the Wianbu. I started out as a teacher and understood that the issue of comfort women and other things like the prisoner of war issue, the Bataan issues, and other issues, Nanjing issues, were all based upon the military action in Asia in the 30s and during World War II. The issue of the Wianbu became prominent in my mind because violence against women was an issue, and I was very concerned about that. But I also was concerned as a school teacher that the government and the Ministry of Education was whitewashing and eliminating information about the Japanese military's action in Asia during World War II, and I think that that's something that's not healthy for the population of Japan.
Considering the political risks you face, was there any moment that you would like to quitting the pushing this bill?
This effort is not against the Japanese people. It is for the Japanese government to take responsibility and apologize to the victims of their military system during World War II, where they captured, kidnapped girls and women and put them into sexual slavery. there's only 52 survivors now living at the House of Sharing. And they're always active in front of the Japanese consulate every Wednesday to ask the Japanese government to apologize.
All right, thank you very much, Representative Honda, for joining us and sharing your insights today.
Thank you.
해방이 됐다면 우리들한테 해방이 없어.
Now, you've briefly talked about the Angoulême Comic Book Festival, and you were extensively and heavily involved in the process. It helped raise awareness about the wartime sexual slavery issue. Tell us about the process and the preparation work. I mean, what was the most difficult challenge, perhaps?
Actually, I found that the first time that I knew about Holocaust was through the very old movie called Diary of Anne Frank, black and white movie. I saw that when I was very young. And after that, the Schindler List and Music Box, for example. A lot of movies that has dealt with the Holocaust issue as their major subject matter or slightly touch upon that matter. I found that that is a very effective way to educate, kind of spread this information to the world. And I found in that regard, the very, very excellent contents, kind of cultural contents, can contribute a lot. So I believe that the culture and art is like a flying carpet. So if I put the message that I want to deliver to the people, that smoothly deliver those messages as if they are the flying carpets. So, and then when I was the member of National Assembly, I legislated the Promotion Act for the comic artists. And that we worked very closely together. And I found that the comic art is something that we can create very quickly without involving a lot of systematic or institutional efforts like movies. So I consulted with the comic artist. And when I went to Paris to attend the OECD meeting, I asked the Angoulême representative to have a meeting and kind of cautiously take up this issue.
Oh, so that's how you were able to use comics as a medium.
And then they say that after listening to all my kind of presentation, the president, the chairman of the committee, told me that this year, year 2014, is the 100th anniversary of the First World War. And their main theme is to think about those violence. So they asked the very famous French comic artist Jacques Tardy to draw, to exhibit the work about the First World War. That is a huge work. And they asked a female comic artist to prepare the comics regarding the sexual violence and domestic violence. So they told me that this comfort women issue will be a perfect fit for this year's their theme. So that's what it happened. And in August, when they came to Korea, we had a media conference regarding how we would like to curate those special exhibition with Korean artists and the Angoulême Festival. And how
Voila.
that's how it worked.
Well, I heard that Japan had a very strong reaction to Korean exhibit and that comic festival, and you really see that what was coming out from them.
What was it like?
Yeah. what are the,
Actually, I kind of later I was informed that a lot of Japanese people submitted their own signature, asking kind of to stop our exhibition, and then they raises a lot of questions and a lot of complaints regarding various activities that we'd like to do. So when I was in Paris to prepare that exhibition, one day before the actual press conference and the Angoulême opening ceremony, I kind of asked our staff, please comply with what the Angoulême Festival Committee is requesting us. Please don't show that we are negotiating. This is not a matter of negotiation. This is a matter of sincerity. Let's show them that we have a sincere will or sincere passion that we'd like to show this in art, in the form of art. And then I asked our staff to show the great respect to their determination. That must be very hard for them because they understand that this is a very political and very sensitive issue. So I didn't kind of ask them for negotiation, but kind of comply with what they requested us to do. So that's how we could save the actual special exhibition. And then I learned a lot from the French intellectuals, and I learned a lot from the Angoulême Festival, and especially learned a lot from the press conference that was made at the opening ceremony. And the festival representative voluntarily held a press conference afterwards. And many Japanese media people asked questions, whether arguing that it is very political, that the Korean government is supporting the special exhibition in a pure art comic festival.
Right.
And the answer from the committee is that to make unknown thing known to the world is not political. To distort what is known to the world is political. That's why I asked the Japanese representative to get rid of their installation this morning. And the second question is, isn't it political to fund, to sponsor the artist to attend this comic festival? And the committee answered that our Angoulême Festival itself is sponsored by the city government. It is not political that an artist is funded by the government to attend such an international art festival. So I was very deeply moved, and then that taught me that the effort of making this fact known to the world citizen is not a political activity. It's a sincere human rights activity, and we should not stop. We should be working very hard in this regard.
So as long as any side is not making or distorting history, then it's okay to address the issue and make the issue known, is what you're saying. Now, some of the local media were talking about how you didn't specifically use or mention the word Japan in your congratulatory message at the event. What was going through your mind? I mean, was that intentional, or was there a reason why you decided not to do so?
That was very, very intentional.
Very intentional.
Very
Okay, there's the
intentional.
answer. Very intentional.
Yeah. That is a matter of sincerity. My goal is, after I kind of started meeting the victims in person, every single of them, what is most important is to restore their dignity. And it's not a matter of scolding the past misconduct, the blaming somebody. This is a matter of drawing the very courageous commitment And when I prepared my speech for the third committee of UN, I didn't specifically mention the name of the country. I think my speech in Angolan Festival was in the same line with that speech in UN committee. And then, actually, the Angolan opening ceremony was a very, very noisy and it's not a very quiet and closed location. It's an open location in the
Very
exhibition
public.
in the public. And then by one sentence, it was translated.
Wow.
So without a very kind of cautious attention, it's very hard to tell whether I use the name of the country specifically or not. But the mayor of Angolan, after listening to my speech, he told me that he was moved. He was moved by the very peaceful approach that I didn't mention the name of the country. And I was so shocked to hear what the mayor told me. And then I found that, wow, the people really think that this is a really sensitive issue and very appreciated very much that we didn't approach this matter as a political issue.
Well, I'm moved by your strategies how to work it out, this whole thing. And those comics that featured in the festival, now I'm hearing that they are currently displayed around the nation. So would you tell us about what's the details, what the plan is?
I was so happy to kind of get a lot of requests from within Korea and outside of Korea that they'd like to have this exhibition. And currently it is open to public in the National History Museum. And then in the Incheon National, the city recent, the Modern History Museum, they already have that. And the Animation Institution in Bucheon has already held that exhibition. And now we have a pending kind of request to tour that exhibition.
Wow, it's non-stopping requests
Yes,
coming from all
right.
over the place.
And we have a planning of kind of sending those exhibitions to anywhere who is willing to take them. And before I attended the Angolan Festival, I made a speech at the EU Parliament and kind of I made a presentation regarding what is the kind of fact of the current status of this matter. And then the UN parliamentarian members requested us to show that exhibition to the EU Parliament. And then we are now kind of talking with them regarding that. And a lot of kind of parliaments, a lot of NGOs, and a lot of museums are requesting.
So that will happen in the near future, hopefully. And your so-called scarf diplomacy was the talk of the town. Now, you have to admit that you gave Korean traditional scarves to the officials that you met after discussing the wartime sexual slavery issue. What did you or do you hope to achieve through those actions? And that's the very scarf that you're wearing.
Yes, this is
beautiful.
This is this scarf. Actually, it started with the Minister Arirang in Korean adoptee to the French government, to France, and she's now the Ministry of Trade. She was appointed again, and then when I met her last year, she gave me as a souvenir the Hermes, the French boutique scarf, and then. After that,
high quality, right?
Yeah, and then after that, I had a chance to meet the Madame Christine Lagarde of the IMF, and then I found that she's a scarf lover. I found her image from the website, and whenever she is in public meetings, she wears
very unique ones too.
Yeah, right, and most of them I found at Hermes, the very French ones. So, and then I found that I thought, what is the representative kind of brand or design of Korean scarf, and kind of so far I couldn't find the exact.
I was trying to come up with a brand and I couldn't either now.
Right. So it occurred to me when I went to one of my kind of 단골집. Kind of she is
a shop that you go to a lot.
Right, for the bed pillows and comfort covers and blankets. And she is kind of doing a lot of very delicate and beautiful pieces. And then this is actually the cover of blanket, kind of a small blanket or the large blanket for the bedspread. And then I asked her to redesign it as a scarf.
Make it into a scarf.
And then when before I meet with the Madame Lagarde, I prepare one and then gave it to her and ask her, whenever you are exposed to many people, please wear it. You are the great messenger of spreading out the Korean culture and design. So after that, I started to kind of present it to the very major world celebrity, including the Alessandro Mendini, the very famous Italian designer who designed all those wine openers and the kitchen utensils with the Alessi. So he really liked it because his chair, named Proust, is consisting of a lot of colorful dots, which is very similar to this
scarf that
this
you
scarf.
have.
So he really liked that. And recently, I created handkerchief for gentlemen, and then gave it to Dr. Gisulmang after we had a discussion, and she really liked it.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So that's an effective tool to when you're talking with officials regarding the issue, I believe, yeah?
Right. I think the to persuade somebody is to only kind of forwarding information is not enough. I'd like to kind of give them, I'd like to make them having some compassion and sympathy and kind of affection to Korean history and Korean culture. So I think it's kind of a comprehensive effort.
And one of the people that you met and gave this scarf to was UNESCO Director General Irina Bokova. And I believe you two talked about listing the documents related to this issue on the UNESCO Memory of the World Register. Why do you think that's an important task?
I found that the memories of the world is something, is the register, something that should be remembered and that should be shared. In that regard, this comfort women issue and its document and its kind of all those materials should be remembered by the world citizen. So I found that the diary of Anne Frank actually was registered as the memories of the world. And when I review all those documents and the statement of these ladies and the actual paintings that they draw during their healing procedure, I found them kind of tremendously valuable. That should be shared with many, as many people as possible. So in preparing those registration, we can actually compile what we have so far, and we can share with the relevant countries. There are a lot of other countries who have the victims of the sexual slavery. And by doing during the procedure, we can educate the people, and then we can share the information. So I think the result of registration itself, as well as the procedure to prepare, is also very important.
나는 이제 그 자발자서 내려가지고 스마라이라는 데가 있는데 그 스마랑 거기로 이제 13명 그러고 갔다. 그래서 그때서 내가 이런 땅이 아니고 우리나라다.
この野郎じっとしてねえと腕へし折るぞ
이제 자꾸 이제 그 상대 안 하려고 내가 막 바람을 했으니까 앞에를 찍으려고 그래갖고 이래 돼서 그만 이 중독이 돼버린 거야. 뭐 숫자도 헤아릴 수 없고 토요일 일요일 날은 말도 못해 줄을 서가지고 옷도 안 벗고 그날로 이따 다 그 이제 난제는 오래된 게 없나. 목숨만 부지하자. 목숨은 살면 내 몸을 뺏어가도 내 마음만이는 안 뺏어간다. 그런 정신으로 내가 살았지.
And let's now connect to Tina Dolgopul, who were one of the chief prosecutors for the Women's International War Crimes Tribunal on Japan's military sexual slavery. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome.
What was the final judgment at the time?
Well, the judgment was issued in 2001, and it looked at the question of criminal as well as state responsibility. So there were a range of people, including Emperor Hirohito, who were indicted on the criminal charges. And basically, it found that Hirohito and a range of Japanese generals were guilty of crimes against humanity with respect to the rape and the sexual slavery of the women who've been taken in the various countries of the Asia-Pacific region. And then it also looked at the question of whether the present government of Japan should be willing to pay reparations to the women. And the answer of the judges of the tribunal was yes, the government was liable for reparations.
As a law professor, you can offer advice to us that what kind of measures can we take to bring this issue to international court or garner the compensation for the victims?
It's going to be very difficult to take this matter to the International Court of Justice from the perspective of South Korea, because South Korea is not a party to the statute of the International Court, and Japan has only recognized the court's jurisdiction where another party has fully recognized the court's jurisdiction. Now, in terms of the disputed islands between Japan and South Korea, Japan has suggested that could go, but Korea's refused those attempts. So I think it would be difficult for an international mechanism. There is in the Treaty of Peace between Japan and South Korea a mechanism for arbitration, but so far Japan's refused to arbitrate this matter. But unless Korea becomes a party to the statute of the International Court of Justice, it's difficult to see how it could force Japan into arbitration other than by diplomatic means and international pressure. But as we all know, there have been a range of resolutions in the United Nations and in various national parliaments calling on Japan to do more. And so far, the government of Japan has been incredibly stubborn and refused to do what it ought to be doing, which is to make adequate reparations. So in an international law context, it's not obvious what the immediate next steps are unless South Korea were willing to become a party to the statute. Then after 12 months, it could actually bring a case before the ICJ.
All right, thank you very much for being on the show and answering some of our questions.
You're very welcome.
Well, the question is not only Korea, but many victims from other countries are still alive. How do you think Korea can work together with other governments? Now, you mentioned about building up procedures and those training together, etc. But you must have some ideas to implement.
Actually, what I don't want to do is to show that we are kind of bullying against one government. So that is something that is very, very important in this matter. And then we found that many private NGOs are already networking together with the other NGOs in other country having victims. So I kind of, we are going to encourage them to do the network and to collect those evidences and statement and materials that is worthy of register as the memories of the war together. And then I think by doing that, we can kind of collaborate together. But specifically, whether to work directly together with the equivalent government entities or through the network of NGO, we are still discussing right now.
The process of discussion. North Korea has also been raising voices about this issue. Is there a possibility that the two Koreas can work together in building more awareness?
I think recently the one of the NGO has had a meeting with the entity in the North Korea, and then I think that they must have some discussions regarding that. And at the same time, I understand that the North Korean government is actually have a great sympathy on this issue too. So I think this is something that the Korea and the North Korean entities can communicate together and work together.
Now I'm giving the floor to the Minister of Gender Equality and Family of the Republic of Korea.
Let me share the agony expressed by some of the witnesses. Some were abducted while they were working in the fields. Others were conned into leaving their homes with promises of well-paying job in factories. How they become comfort women may differ, but they share these facts. They were gathered by someone, and they were handed over to someone. They were young girls in their teens. They could not escape, even if they desperately wanted to. They were virtually prisoners when they were closely watched. Each had to serve from 10 to 30 soldiers every single day.
Well, you mentioned that you deliver speech at UN, and you must define the UN as most important place to work. And what kind of role do you expect the UN can play or should play?
So far, since 1992, I think, altogether 10 times of UN activities have been made against the Japanese government, including the Kuaraswamy report and McDougall report, and the UN Human Rights Committee actions and other various committee action. The role of UN is very important because this is not a matter of bilateral relationship. This is a matter of the UN, all those member countries of UN and the current countries, and this is a matter of human rights. So I think in that regard, the role of UN cannot be kind of underestimated for this matter.
All right, Minister Jo, thank you very much for coming on to the show today and sharing your stories with us. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
And today we talked extensively on this issue, and it's a very sensitive issue and it should not be overlooked as well.
Right. In Germany, people are educated about Holocaust and they acknowledge the past, and this is to ensure there is a better future. With the issue of comfort women, the question is how much longer it will overshadow Japan's future to come. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.